Which games are must-bets for Week 11 of the 2024 NFL season? What's going on, football fans and gridiron gamblers? It's Mitch here with BLV Best Bets for Week 11. My 5, make it 6, best bets versus the spread for Week 11. If that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for weekly NFL best bets versus the spread just like this. Let me know in the comment section below which games you are betting on. What is your favorite bet versus the spread this week? And if you have any questions at all, let me know in the comment section below. If you're wondering, Mitch, where do I get your bets? Patreon, link in the description. We've been on fire on Patreon. Shout out to all the patrons and YouTube members out there supporting the BLV. $10 a month gets you all of my favorite bets each and every week that I'm making with my real money. Let's get started with my favorite spread picks of the week. And I'm going to kick it off with Thursday Night Football. That's right. A NFC East clash. I like the home team. I like the favorite. I like the Philadelphia Eagles laying 3.5 this week against the Commanders. I have not been as high on the Commanders as many others. Some people say I hate them. Some people say I'm a Jaden Daniels hater. I'm also a little bit higher on the Eagles dating back to the offseason than a lot of people. So when you combine those two things, what I've seen from the Eagles defense, the regression I've seen from the Commanders offensively, combined with the strength of competition that the Commanders have been feasting on, I like a lot about this matchup for the Eagles. First of all, did you know that the Eagles are undefeated with A.J. Brown? They're 6-0 when A.J. Brown plays. And as far as I know, A.J. Brown is playing on Thursday Night Football. A.J. Brown is a beast, and he holds so many keys to victory for this team. Because with the Eagles, you have the rare dimension of an explosive passing attack combined with a ball control rushing attack. This game for the Eagles is going to be about running the ball with Saquon Barkley, establishing the line of scrimmage, bullying the Commanders' defense, and eating time of possession and keeping Jaden Daniels on the bench. That's the biggest goal for the Eagles. Luckily, especially at home, they are dominant in this facet, and they have been dominant in this area under Nick Sirianni. The Eagles are first in rushing attempts, second in rushing yards, 6th in yards per attempt this season. They are facing a Commanders defense that is 29th in yards per attempt and 28th in rushing yards allowed. You give the football 20 plus times to one of the best backs and best players in football right now, who is a man-possessed Saquon Barkley, he will dictate the tempo to the Commanders. And that sets up what? A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith. That's where I was going. Brown, Devontae, right? A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. If Devontae is, in fact, playing, he is questionable, but I believe he will play. Having both of those receivers on the field create one-on-one mismatches for a cornerback group that will not have Marshawn Lattimore just yet, does not have great matchups on the outside for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So the way I view it is, remember the Steelers last week? They put up 28 on the Commanders on the road at Washington. Pittsburgh ran the ball with purpose. They ran the ball, attempted 38 runs in that game for a reason, because the Commanders aren't very good at stopping the run, especially when it comes to 3 and 4 yard runs, right? So the Eagles will be able to get what they want on early downs, setting up Jalen Hurts for success on later downs, also allowing the Eagles to run the ball into those tush-push looks on 4th down, which is where they're nearly unstoppable. On top of that, if the Commanders start to, well, we got to stop the run because Saquon's gashing us, then A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith become very dangerous, just as George Pickens and Mike Williams were for the Steelers and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, kind of similar in regards to they're both great throwing the deep ball. They're kind of inconsistent throwing the ball underneath. That is what beats this Commander defense. So I could see the very same thing happening in this game. The Eagles just have an overall more potent offensive line. They're going to get Jordan Mailata back. He returns after missing a few weeks. The O-line in Philly is now fully healthy for an NFC East clash. On top of that, who's the head coach of the Commanders? He's Dan Quinn, of course, who's doing a great job for the Commanders this season. Cliff Kingsbury doing a great job as the offensive coordinator. But Dan Quinn is somebody that Jalen Hurts, Sirianni, Kellen Moore are very familiar with. Kellen Moore worked on his staff in Dallas with him as the offensive coordinator of Dallas under Mike McCarthy. Jalen Hurts has played his defense multiple times. And in Philly, he was 2-0 against that Dallas defense. Fairly efficient, never threw an interception in Philadelphia against the Cowboys. So the way that I view Dan Quinn's defense, he wants to play man on the outside. Not a good idea against A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, especially when he wants to stop the run. He resorts to playing more man coverage. That's not a good idea. Secondly, I feel like the run defense area of Dan Quinn has always been weaker because he likes to play a lot of dynamic blitz packages, move people around, stand people up, have guys coming from different angles. That is not great against just the simplistic Eagles offense that just gashes you, just runs inside zone continuously, right? Like it's going to lead to explosive runs. So I like this style of attack against Dan Quinn. That's a reason the Eagles have never lost to Dan Quinn when he was in Dallas at home. They always beat them in Dallas in shootouts, but never really in defensive games. Vic Fangio on the other side has kind of figured out his personnel and his defense. The Eagles' defense, I think, might be the most slept-on unit in football. Their safeties are playing great. Cooper DeJean and also Quinyon Mitchell as rookie corners are playing phenomenal football. Zach Bond is a borderline Pro Bowler right now at linebacker. And I love how Jalen Carter is playing. Sweat has got it going on the edge. I think that a guy like Nolan Smith would be a great contain man for Jaden Daniels in terms of not letting him out of the pocket and succeed out of the pocket, which is really where Jaden Daniels is so successful. And if you want to say, well, yeah, the Commanders have not played a lot of competition, but the Eagles haven't either, right? Like they dominated the Giants, they dominated the Bengals, they dominated Jacksonville, they dominated Dallas, but the one that stands out there recently is the Bengals. Like the Bengals are a pretty good team, especially offensively, and the Eagles held the Bengals in Cincinnati to 17 points and only 280 yards. This is an offense that just played the Ravens in primetime and had like nearly 500 passing yards, never mind 280 total yards, right? So I think the Eagles defense is legit. They've got talent, they've got coaching. Everything points to they're actually legit. I think the team that is a fraud, that is fugazi here, is the Commanders. I mean, you look at the Commanders and the competition they've played. They've lost to the best teams they've played. They lost to Tampa in week 1 when they were fully healthy. They lost to Pittsburgh at home. They lost to Baltimore, right? Some of the teams they beat, like the Panthers, the Bears, right? Like the Giants. And you look at recently how they've played. You look at, okay, well, they lost to Baltimore. Then they smoked the Panthers. The Panthers are terrible. Then they beat Chicago on a Hail Mary. And Chicago is just recently, after that game, after that Hail Mary, they were destroyed by the Cardinals, who Washington beat by a lot, by the way, earlier in the year. And then they were destroyed by New England. So is Chicago really that good, or is Washington trending down? They beat the Giants by 5, 27-22, I think, something like that. And the Giants just lost to the Panthers, right? So when you look at the Commanders, they're kind of trending down as the Eagles are trending up with dominant victories over New York, who Washington just played. Dominant victories over Cincinnati, who, by the way, Washington played in the same venue, only won by about 5 or 6. They dominated Jacksonville, the Eagles. I know that the score ended up close, but it was like double the yardage. The only reason that happened is because of a couple fourth down decisions that were a little spotty by Sirianni, but they still came through with the win, and they dominated Dallas. So to me, the Eagles, I just think they're a different tier of team. I view them as an actual NFC contender with a statement to prove here on Thursday Night Football against Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. On top of that, to top it all off, the Commanders are probably the team that is not as healthy as the Eagles. They do have 3 tackles on their injury report, offensive tackles on the injury report, while the Eagles are pretty much fully healthy on both sides of the ball. So give me Philadelphia on Thursday night, -3.5. Now moving to Sunday, guys. Our first pick for Sunday is going to be the Houston Texans, -7.5. This is actually Monday Night Football. So 7.5. So I like the Texans here. This would probably be my second favorite bet. I'll give you my first here in a second. But after you have a successful, hopefully Thursday, then Sunday, this is the bet to top it all off. I like the Texans, -7.5. It's a great matchup against Dallas in a bounce-back spot, coming off a game where the Texans let one slip against the Detroit Lions. Now, you could say the Lions dominated the second half against the Texans. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, but that's also the Detroit Lions. Like, literally the best team in the NFL, who annihilated Dallas by like 1,000 points. Remember that game? Well, the Texans went toe-to-toe with that football team last week. The Texans have been beat up. I mean, they have not had their best players. Will Anderson, out, right? Like, Nico Collins has been out. Al-Shair's missed time at linebacker, who's a beast. He's actually back. There's a lot of reasons to like Houston here. First of all, beat up against teams that they've lost to, like Detroit, like Green Bay. They still were able to make those games very competitive, down-to-the-wire games. Detroit, Green Bay. They actually beat Buffalo when they were a little bit healthier and had Nico Collins during the first half. So they beat a legit Buffalo team, and their other loss was pretty embarrassing at Minnesota. But that's the only real, bad mark on their entire record, in my opinion. The other teams they've lost to were legit football teams, and I could argue they could have won those games. Now, when it looks at Houston, I feel like they're going to be able to run the ball in Dallas. Dallas has been putrid against the run all year, and if you're able to run the ball, you're able to set Dallas's defense up for a lot of different things, including explosive passing plays and play-action plays. You think about the way that the Texans' offense is constituted. If they're able to run the ball, they are a Shanahan type of scheme. We saw the Niners take on Dallas with an explosive third quarter of 3 straight touchdowns. If the Texans can run the ball with Joe Mixon, that could set up a returning Nico Collins for a lot of big plays. And I think Nico Collins could go off in this game. He's had an extra week to get his hamstring back and ready to roll. And I think he's going to explode in a primetime Monday Night Football spot. I don't think Trayvon Diggs can stick with him. I think Nico Collins, there are stats out there that prove he's probably the best separator in football right now. He just makes everybody better on this Texans team and Texans offense. Stroud and the rest of the offense. He creates space for Tank Dell. He creates space for Dalton Schultz. He helps the running game. And he is Stroud's go-to guy on early downs and third down. And he's that guy where Stroud will create time and make magic, and Nico will find a way to get open down the field. And that's where Stroud is so dangerous. So I love the ability for Mixon to potentially have a big game here, mixed with a Nico Collins return spot, mixed with just the fact that the Texans will be angry and probably very motivated to go out in a big spot where it's Dallas, the world is watching, and although Dallas does not have Dak Prescott, this is a point-to-prove spot. This is Texans are for real, we're back, we've got our guys back, and this is how we really play when we've got our guys. And with Nico out there, with Mixon out there, I think that's going to change this offense because they're going to run it and they're going to be explosive throwing the ball against this Dallas team, which has been a formula dating back all the way back to late last season that we've seen be very successful. I mean, remember that Packers playoff game? This is the same sort of deal here. Run the ball successfully, set up big crossing routes and explosive passes. Detroit did the exact same thing. Niners did the exact same thing. This is the formula against Dallas. On top of that, this is also a defense in Houston that I think, for one, when they have most of their players, I think they're a top 5 defense in the NFL. They have probably the best pass rush in the NFL, and they're facing Dallas's offensive line, which has terrible tackle play right now. And behind those tackles is Cooper Rush, who can't escape, can't move, doesn't have an explosive run ability or an explosive gun ability, right? He doesn't have an ability to throw the ball down the field. He doesn't have an ability to run. He's a game manager who's at his best with a run game and a defense. Like, people liked Cooper Rush as an underdog. Cooper Rush as a game manager when he had a great defense and he had a great running game. But Dallas doesn't have either of those things. Dallas can't run the ball. They won't be able to run the ball against Houston. Dallas can't play defense that well, and it sets up Cooper Rush, a dink and dunk quarterback, in an awful situation against the defense with their linebackers back. Azeez is back in the middle. We saw him feast against Detroit. Jalen Petrie is an excellent tackler at that nickel spot. Not going to allow yards after catch against a slow Dallas receiving core overall. And really, it's just CeeDee Lamb that they have to defend. And usually, D'Amico is very smart. On top of that, D'Amico is great at blitzing and sending timely blitzes and confusing quarterbacks. He's going to be able to force some pressures in the face of Cooper Rush. He's going to force a fumble. He's going to force a turnover, an interception, a bad play that makes this a blowout. So I think that the Texans' defense is going to be really where they feast, which is going to set up their offense for a ton of success in this game. Nico Collins is back. Will Anderson might be back. This is the same spread we saw Dallas get against the Eagles. That didn't turn out too well. 7.5 at home. I think this could be a similar result where the Texans were talking about at the beginning of the fourth quarter, what's the future of Dallas? Who's their head coach going to be? What's going to happen to Dak? All this stuff because the score's 34-7. Like, that's literally what I think could happen here. So Houston gets a break. They get a bounce back spot. They've played very good teams recently. I think they bounce back, they get healthy, and they destroy the Cowboys. A team that I would argue is, with Rush, no Dak, with the current constituted roster they have, with the coaching they have, they're a bottom 3 team in the NFL. So I think the Texans destroy that type of team. We saw them play a pretty bad Patriots team and win by 21 on the road not too long ago. I think they beat the Cowboys, maybe even worse in this game. So give me the Texans on Monday night. Now let's get to the Sunday picks. Our favorite pick on Sunday, the Green Bay Packers, -5.5 at the Chicago Bears. I love this spot for the Packers, and I think the Bears flat out stink. I think if you haven't already faded the Bears, like I told you to last week, oh, Mitch, you can't tell me to bet on the Patriots. What are you talking about? I told you to bet on the Patriots, okay? And it wasn't really to do with the Patriots. It was more to do with the Bears. So we're going to fade them again. This time we're fading them as a dog. Packers at Chicago, laying 5.5. I absolutely love that this has gone under 6. It's beautiful. I would lay it at 6 as well. I would lay it up to 7, I think, honestly. I think the Packers will beat the Bears, and I think this is a huge statement game for the Packers. They've played some sloppy football as of late. They have not played their best ball, specifically Jordan Love. He's had a bye week to get healthier. He's had a bye week to prepare. And this Packers team owns the Bears, this franchise. They own them. They've won 10 straight games in this rivalry. This is not much of a rivalry at all. This is not a division dog that you want to back. The Packers own the Bears. I mean, 10 straight is ridiculous. That's 5 straight years. And Love is 2-0 as well, right? Love last year was great against the Bears. He had some of his best games. He had 245 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 316 yards and 3 touchdowns, right? So this guy had 5 touchdowns, no picks. He averaged a 129 passer rating against these Bears, and now he's coming off a bye week, rested with all his weapons, ready to rock and ready to go. On top of that, Matt LaFleur, he coaches circles around Matt Eberflus and this entire Bears staff. He also has a bye to prepare for this team on top of just getting his team right and in the right spot. Why I love the Packers so much, I love games in which the Packers can run the ball. The Bears are terrible against the run. We saw them against the Cardinals get gashed by James Conner, DeMarcado, and everybody else. They even couldn't stop Ramondre Stevenson and the Patriots rushing attack, which in my opinion is not very good as a Patriots fan. They were embarrassed in both of those games. The Bears could not score a touchdown. They have not scored a touchdown in 21 straight drives, which is like a historic rate. I mean, they are awful. They can't move the ball. They can't score points. And if they can't score points against the Packers, good night. You'll be covering by halftime, maybe the end of the first quarter. The Bears are 28th in yards per attempt running the ball on offense and on defense. They're bad in the running game. The Packers are great in the running game. They're top 10 in stopping the run this year. They're, I think, 7th. And they're top 5 also in offensive rushing yards per attempt. Josh Jacobs will feast. This running game will feast, which ultimately takes pressure off of Jordan Love. And that's where Jordan Love is at his best, off of play action, creating explosives through the air, like we talked about with the Houston Texans. So I think Jacobs starts the engine of this attack. They get the ball going downfield to Reed, to Kraft at tight end, to Watson, to Dobbs. And I think the Packers just unleash an absolute dominant performance here. Yeah, Chicago has a new offensive coordinator. I'm not buying it. I do not care. I'm not even a huge fan of this new offensive coordinator dating back to his days at Carolina. I don't think it's a big deal. I think Caleb sucks right now. He can't throw the ball. His mechanics are awful. He's missing wide open players. He's not confident. He holds on the ball too long. And the Packers are going to be able to blitz him left and right. And they had a bye week to prepare for the tendencies of this offensive line, which could be without its starting tackles once again. Maybe they get their tackles back. But even if they get their tackles back, they might be missing Tevin Jenkins, their best guard on their team. Brisker is still out at safety. Montez Sweat isn't practicing on Wednesday. They have injuries on this Bears offense, on this Bears defense. This is probably the worst performing offensive line in the league against one of the best offensive lines in the league. This is a complete mismatch. I do not understand why this is not above 6 or 7. I don't get it. I get it's a divisional game, but everything to me screams Packers blow the Bears out, and the Bears are just not a good team. I power rank them as a bottom 5 team in football. I thought the Patriots would beat them last week, and it ended up being like one of the easiest covers of the entire season. So, yeah, the Packers minus 5.5. I like this game a lot. Tease this game for sure. Absolutely. Packers minus 5.5. Next up, let's get to the Browns +1. At the New Orleans Saints. This is one of those that just doesn't make a lot of sense from a spread perspective. First of all, I have the Browns kind of ranked as like the 21st best team in the NFL, considering the talent they have, the coaching staff they have. I'm a little bit higher on Jameis than I was Deshaun Watson. There's a variety of reasons, but most of all, the Browns are a healthy team at a rare point in the season when not a lot of teams are healthy. They did trade Zadarius Smith. They did lose JOK at linebacker. But other than that, they are pretty much healthy, especially on offense. Their O-line's the healthiest it's been. They're coming off a bye week rested. Their receiving core is fully healthy. Their secondary's fully healthy. Myles Garrett's in there. Like, their team, Nick Chubb's back. Their team is healthy. Meanwhile, the Saints have been beat up all year. They're unrecognizable at wide receiver. They have no good receivers on their team left. They have no offensive line. And their corners, they traded Marshawn Lattimore. They're unrecognizable at the corner position. This is just not a good Saints roster, not a good Saints team. I don't understand why they're favored over the Browns. The Browns are way more talented on both sides of the ball. They got the much better offensive line. They've got the much better defensive line. They're a much better secondary. They're a much better overall team. And I would argue they're much better coached. Stefanski and Schwartz over the Rizzler over there, like the Riddler. So, I mean, yeah. Browns +1 just doesn't make sense. So let's dive more into it. The Browns are coming off of a bye week with a good coaching staff that's going to get Jameis Winston prepared for a revenge game against the Saints, the team that Drew Brees promised that would be his team into the future. Jameis was given the opportunity. He didn't come through. He didn't shine through. He was eating dubs, but not quite enough, right? And then now Jameis, he's inspired this team, this Browns team, to keep it going, to keep the winning ways up, and to keep the spirits up. And we saw them beat the Ravens. Like, they beat the Ravens, this team. I get the Saints beat the Falcons, but that's a division rival that's not that good in their building, right? Like, and they got totally outplayed. That's not the case for the Browns. Yeah, it was a division rival in their building, but the Ravens are tiers above the Falcons. And the Ravens are not a team that, like, the Browns luckily beat. Sure, there were some drop picks, but other than that, like, the Falcons missed 3 field goals. The Falcons outpossessed the Saints by 11 minutes of possession. The Falcons had 100 more yards than the Saints. The Falcons had 90 more rushing yards than the Saints. The Falcons have 11 more first downs than the Saints. Now, that's not the case for the Browns. And yes, the Browns lost to the Chargers pretty convincingly, but this is a great spot for them because now they can look at what's worked with Jameis, what's not worked after 2 games. They can recognize what will work, what will not work. They're playing a team coming off a win that knows they're not very good. So pressure is taken off of the new coach. The Saints don't have a pass rush that I think will affect Winston. The Saints are not good against the run. They're 31st in yards per attempt allowed. Nick Chubb, coming off a bye, has a little bit of his feet under him now. I think he'll have his best game so far of his comeback season. And the Browns defense is legitimately the best unit in this game by a long margin. I think it's still a top 10 defense in football, especially that secondary that can lock up the Saints' no-name receivers in man coverage. Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome are going to take these receivers and explosive plays out of the game and make Derek Carr uncomfortable with pressure from Myles Garrett and company. So, yeah, I like the Browns a lot here. You even look at how they've played recently. Like, they lost to the Eagles by 4 with Deshaun Watson, and the Eagles look like a really good team right now. They lost to the Bengals by 7, and the Bengals, we know, are a little bit underrated given who they've played. They had 8 more first downs than the Chargers, despite losing to them by 2 scores. Even in games that they lost, like, they've looked decent recently, and their defense has definitely been playing a lot better. So, I like the Browns here a lot. I think this is one of the better underdogs to pick in week number 11. Next up, we've got the Los Angeles Rams -4.5 at the New England Patriots. Of course, I'm fading my Patriots this week after backing them the last couple of weeks, it feels like. But we've had a good rhythm going with the Patriots, and I feel pretty good about examining my team right now. And like I've said, I think Drake May has slept on. I think a lot of people don't understand how good this kid is. But this is a game where I just don't think that he's going to be able to overcome the matchup issues in this game. This is a bounce back spot for the Rams. This is a team that, yes, is coming off a short week, but had an extended rest the week previous. This is a young quarterback, a young team, a young coach in New England that is coming off an emotional big win where everyone's like praising them and stuff. I don't think that's going to go well the week after against a team that's angry, that know they should have beaten the Dolphins in terms of they didn't play well. That was a team they could have beaten. They lost a chance to get this NFC West roll going, to make the playoffs. Like, that was a huge loss for them, and it was embarrassing in a number of ways. And I think that the Rams will be just so much more detailed and so much better, especially offensively. The side of the ball that Sean McVay is known for, I think they're going to run the ball on the Patriots because the Patriots' run defense is not very good. We saw Tony Pollard gash them consistently. Remember, the Patriots lost to the Titans. I know that they just hammered the Bears, but again, that was more about the Bears. That's why we love the Packers this week. The Titans beat the Patriots. The Titans suck, okay? The Titans are awful. The Titans beat the Patriots, all right? The Rams beat the Vikings. They beat Seattle by 10 and 6 points just a couple weeks ago. I understand that they lost to Miami. So this feels like an overreaction, this 4.5. Like, the Rams just beat the Vikings and Seattle, better teams than the Patriots. They beat Seattle in Seattle. They beat the Vikings by double digits. Like, those are better teams than the Patriots. The Patriots... Yeah, they beat the Bears, but they lost the Titans. And they shouldn't have even went to overtime. That was just Drake May doing some ludicrous things behind a terrible offensive line, which is where I really love the Rams here. The Rams have probably the most underrated pass rush in the NFL. The Patriots O-line is legitimately the worst O-line in the NFL, other than maybe the beat-up Bears O-line. Other than that, the Patriots have the worst O-line in the league. They have like a 3 out of 100 pass block efficiency by ESPN metrics, which is the worst in the NFL. And because the Rams will be able to run the ball, I think they'll possess the ball. I think that will set up Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for success off play action and in the passing game. I think Stafford will be on one because he'll be angry about his performance against Miami. And a low-key thing that I think a lot of people will overlook, Monday against the Dolphins were able to get pressure on Stafford because the Rams had a lot of new pieces involved in the O-line because they were returning from injury. But now that they have a full game and a full tape to look at and to fix, that's going to help them huge against New England, especially considering New England does not have a good pass rush. I get that they sacked Caleb Williams 9 times, but that was about Caleb holding the ball. Stafford's not going to do that. I think this could be, a 7 to 10 point win for the Rams. I'm not saying they're going to absolutely annihilate my Patriots, but I feel confident that the Rams are going to go into New England, play more detailed, better football under a substantially better coach, Sean McVay, against Gerard Mayo. So give me the Rams. I think they get back on track. I think they win by a touchdown at least, and I think they take it in New England. So That is our fifth best bet of the video. Our sixth and final bet is Sunday Night Football, the Bengals plus 1.5. And remember, guys, this order is based on preference. I think the Packers and the Texans are flippable, depending on your perspective there. The Eagles is first because it's on Thursday night, and I put the Thursday night game first. But after that, it's in order of preference. So the Bengals are the weakest play of the week, but I still like it, and I'm going to explain why. So the Bengals plus 1.5 against the Chargers. I, first of all, have the Bengals ranked higher in my power rankings than the Chargers for a variety of reasons. I think they have a much better offense. They're much more explosive. Joe Burrow is playing like an MVP candidate. And I think the Bengals have played a much tougher schedule, and they've hung in with much better teams. And despite the Chargers having a better record, they've benefited from playing a cupcake schedule. So that's the first thing I want to go over. The Chargers have beaten the worst teams in football. They've beaten the Titans, the Browns with Winston, the Saints with Spencer Rattler, the Panthers with Bryce Young, the Raiders, and the Broncos, which was their best win. It was a division rival, and they won by 7. Okay, but it's Bo Nix. So Bo Nix, Will Levis, Jameis Winston, Spencer Rattler, Bryce Young, Gardner Minshew. Now you're going to have to face Joe Burrow. Now, what are the games that the Chargers lost, right? They lost to some good teams. They lost to the Cardinals and Kyler Murray on Monday Night Football, another primetime spot. They lost to the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, I believe, right? And this is the sort of the same category, and they lost the Steelers in Pittsburgh, okay? The Steelers are a solid team. I would even argue that the only legit team the Chargers have played is the Ravens. Otherwise, they haven't really played anyone that is, legit. Like, the Steelers are good, right? Like, the Cardinals are good. I wouldn't say they're overwhelming. And the Chargers are 6-3, and they have the best defense in the league according to points against, because they didn't even play the Ravens yet. What am I talking about? They played the Chiefs. They lost the Chiefs. That's my bad. Okay, so the only legit team they've played is the Chiefs in Kansas City, and they lost by 7. And that was even a Chiefs team that wasn't playing as well offensively as they are now. And I would argue that because Rashee Rice got hurt in that game. I think that might have been Kareem Hunt's first game, or maybe they didn't even have Kareem Hunt yet. Like, guys, the Chargers just have played nobody. I mean, you really think about it, they've just played nobody. The Bengals have 10 days of rest to prepare and get ready for this game. Zach Taylor has called it a must-win game. And if you think about it, I know this might be crazy to say, but the Bengals kind of were screwed by the refs last week in a primetime game. You do wonder if they're going to get some calls this week. I'm just going to throw that out there. This is another primetime game the world is watching. We saw Joe Burrow get face masked twice on the same drive. There was pass interference in the end zone. They didn't call it. So there's a good chance that the Bengals actually get some calls this week. On top of that, from a schematic perspective, the Chargers defense is good, but they play a lot of zone. Joe Burrow, great against zone this year. Jamar Chase, phenomenal against zone this year. They're picking apart zone. Burrow is quick-minded and very accurate, and their rapport is out of this world. If they get T. Higgins back, I think they could put up a great game against a Charger defense that's seen as good, but I don't think they've seen a passing offense this good. Remember, they played Bryce Young, Will Levis. Even the Chiefs don't have a passing offense nearly as good as the Bengals, right? The Cardinals don't have a passing offense. They're more of a running team, nearly as good. The Steelers obviously don't. So they haven't seen a quarterback, a passing offense, anywhere near as explosive or as consistent or as accurate or as good as Joe Burrow. And you think about the Bengals and who they've played and how unfortunate they've been. They could have beat the Chiefs. They could have beat the Ravens twice. They have played juggernauts in the NFL, right? And especially their defense has played juggernauts, right? They've played some of the best running teams in football, yet they rank 6th in yards per attempt allowed. What do the Chargers like to do? They still like to run the ball with Dobbins and Edwards. That's a big engine to start and kickstart their offense. This is a Greg Roman offense. Obviously, the Bengals will know that well because he used to be the Raven guy in that division. The Eagles is who the Bengals played. The Chiefs, a good rushing team by success rate. The Ravens twice, the best running team in the league. Washington, and they're still 6th in yards per attempt allowed on defense. So the Bengals are good against the run despite kind of the belief surrounding their defense. And obviously, the Chargers don't have great weapons. So I don't think the Bengals are really going to fear these receivers in the way that they might have feared A.J. Brown, or they might have feared Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, and the way Lamar is scheming it up, or Terry McLaurin, who burnt them a couple times. Like, the Bengals D is actually pretty healthy. They're stopping the run. And then on top of everything, great passing offense, improved defense, healthier defense. I think the Ravens offense just makes the Bengals look really bad. And you top it all off with Burrow and the Bengals as an underdog. Burrow as an underdog is 19-9. He is 13-5 as a road dog in his career against the spread. He's also 13-3 off of a loss on the road versus the spread as well. So this is a guy that just gets up for these games, that when he's a dog, when he's counted out, he plays his best ball. I think Joe Burrow is about to take this team on a winning streak, and I think it starts in Los Angeles on Sunday Night Football with the world watching. If you agree, let me know in the comments. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. Those are my best bets for week number 11. Gronk, spike the like button and subscribe. And if you want more, my actual bets with my real money and what I'm actually doing this Sunday and Thursday night and Monday night, then check out Patreon, link in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. It's Mitch. Deuces.